guys, it's your girl Aisha, aka Geek XX Chic, and normally this would be a reaction to Sweet Home Season 2, but fortunately a mishap happened. In the course of my moving, I lost the memory card that had the video reaction to this episode and the next episode, so I promise I searched everywhere for the last 3 days trying to find this memory card. I can't find it anywhere. I am so sorry. I don't know where it is. And I did think about like just re-recording a reaction, but then it wouldn't have been truthfully my first reaction to it, which is what I prefer to give as my first true reaction to something, unless of course I specifically say from the get-go that I am rewatching something that I've already watched. So yes, my deepest apologies for those who are looking forward to seeing my video reactions to episodes 3 and 4. They are lost. I am so sorry. So what I thought I would do is just give a quick review on both of those particular episodes, since I did in fact watch them. And like I said, the videos exist. They are just gone, unfortunately. They are in the wind. And so I do hope y'all can forgive me. I'm going to be far more careful to make sure that doesn't happen again. But yeah, if you've ever seen those SD cards be small, it's not hard to lose them. And unfortunately, for the first time in years, that's happened to me. So I'm really, really frustrated about that. But anyhow, on to episode 3 of Sweet Home Season 2. So in this particular episode, we had Lee Kyung, who is the firefighter, finally get to see her fiance after looking for him for some time. He was in fact the patient that we saw in that big, what looked like a hyperbaric chamber that he was laying in. We saw from episode 1 that he is on the brink of death. There's no meat on those bones. There's no hair on his body. Like, it's clearly been through hell and back. And it looks like the only thing keeping him alive are the machines that he's attached to. And this whole situation was very stressful on Lee Kyung. She starts crying. She feels horrible. Lord knows she probably feels like maybe she should have tried to get there sooner. But as we know from last season, he was in there for a long time. Like, he was in there since before the outbreak really started to spread of this monsterization. So Lord knows what that crazy doctor was doing to him the entire time. But anyways, one of the crazy things that happened with that afterwards is that her baby, who last season we discovered she was pregnant, and of course we weren't given a time frame for how far along she was, but there was no physical signs of her pregnancy yet to see. So one could guess that she was still in her first trimester, very early in her first trimester, but her stomach started to rapidly expand. We're talking like she went from maybe 2 months along to being full term in a matter of minutes. It looked excruciating. It looked painful. And she was knocked out by the sudden stress on her body. And when she passed out, we see that the changeling was actually in the room the entire time. To my dismay, he is healing finally. His body is back to being restored. We saw that he was paralyzed for quite a long time. Like, we saw in last season that both the changeling and Hyun-soo tended to heal pretty fast. Like, we heard initially, like when for Hyun-soo, well, Hyun-soo's who we have the metrics on. Let's go with him. Last season when Hyun-soo got injured, I think it started out with being only like 20 minutes or so for him to fully heal up. But then we saw that as he got further and further away from his golden hour, it started to become like an hour or a couple of hours before he would recover from really severe injuries. That is, like little ones he healed from immediately. But when he, for example, fell down like 10 flights of stairs and probably cracked his head wide open, that took him like over an hour to recover from. And we saw that Eunhyo, I think is his name. Eunhyuk from last season, who was the guy who was running everything, Eunhyu's brother. He was actually tracking how long it took for Hyun-soo to recover after he would sustain a heavy injury. So anyways, point being, they usually recover quite fast. But then we saw with the changeling that it took him a long time to even be able to move his body. Again, like the lower half of his body had clearly been broken, and it took him hours to get his healing back. But eventually it did happen. And as I said, I was kind of hoping that it wouldn't, because my prayer was that the original owner of the body was messing with him and not allowing him to heal or allowing him to use his powers. But like I said, he was able to get his ability to walk back. And then we see that he basically decided that he was going to free all of the other neo-humans because he knew what they were going through, and he didn't want them to have to stay there and continue to be tortured indefinitely. So that was basically what he did. He left Lee Kyung alone, which I wasn't sure if he would do. I wasn't sure if he would try to hurt her because, he seems to like to hurt people for fun, but he left her alone. And again, I think it's because he saw what happened with her stomach and probably figured out that the baby was also a monster, and that's why he didn't want to hurt her. That's the only thing that I'm thinking, but I could be wrong. Anyway, back to Hyun-soo. Hyun-soo is not happy about what happened in the previous episode. He doesn't know why these people are continuing to test him if they have no desire to actually save or protect the monsters. And basically the doctor kind of let him know that before he left that he was well, that was more last episode actually. No, that was in episode 2 where he had the conversation with the doctor, but he's still clearly mulling over that and not okay with it. And I think he's still trying to figure out what his purpose is now, because now that he realizes that it's just possibly going to be fruitless for him to be there, especially considering that the vaccine, he's been told that the vaccine has already been created and used, he's really starting to wonder what his point is for staying in this cell and staying with these people. And we don't really see Hyun-soo again till the end, so we'll come to him in a second. Oh no, actually we might as well just finish up his arc, because he didn't have a lot in this episode really, until it got down to when everyone was trying to escape, and then we see the changeling finally get to him. And once again, the changeling starts to try to provoke him, try to get him angry, and basically say like, didn't I tell you that this is what this place was? Like, he was basically giving Hyun-soo a big I told you so about coming back to this place. He's like, you had these grandiose ideas. In the end, you turned out to be just another guinea pig to them. They don't care about you. This is what this place really is. And basically he's trying to get Hyun-soo to say, like, admit that he was right. But of course, Hyun-soo is not saying that, because he still doesn't agree with what the changeling is doing and what his philosophy is on everything as far as the monsterization. So they basically get into an argument because the changeling's like, look, I'm giving you one more chance to basically join us, or you can stay here and die. And so that kicks off a fight between the two of them. And this time, Hyun-soo actually allows the monsterization to take over, because we've seen since episode 1 that he's really been fighting letting the monster out, but he finally does let it out, and we see like the full transformation. We're not talking like just the eyes here, like the full wing comes out, but it looks like it's still a battle, because we see that even when the wing comes out, that Hyun-soo is still like grabbing it with his other good arm and trying to like bring it back in and try to rein it in. And because he really can't control it, A, and B, I think is still fighting it, he of course loses the battle to the changeling, because the changeling now has his abilities back in full. Like, he's able to turn his hand back into that weird whip thing that he does or whatever. And so, yeah, he ends up beating Hyun-soo and, of course, insulting him the entire time. Eventually, Hyun-soo gets defeated, and he says to him that, you know, at first he was just going to kill him, but now he wants him to suffer instead. And then he does something to Hyun-soo that we've never seen before, where it's like he petrifies him. And I'm still not sure exactly what happened, but his whole body ends up looking like it turns into stone or something. But basically, the changeling lets us as an audience know, and Hyun-soo, that he's not dying, he's not dead. He's just going to be in this state where he can't move or do anything, but he's going to be alert and awake and aware of everything that's happening to him. And he basically said, you're going to sit here for eternity and just watch this world fall apart around you, because that's a better punishment than just killing you. So he leaves Hyun-soo like that, and that's like basically it. He's literally left in this place when all the other neo-humans have been left or have been let out. But we also see that the humans are gone, and this is kind of brings us to what happens with the survivors. So we see that the remaining survivors are now going to a stadium, because that's the new safe zone. And the stadium is a little bit more better set up than what we had back in episode 1, which was Chaos. And this one has a test that they do on everyone going into the facility. Basically, they cut your hand, and if you heal up right away, then they know you're probably in the, either you already have turned or you're in the process, and you're not allowed to go in. And if you don't, then you're allowed to go in, and you're given a stamp that says that you're human. And anyways, we see that Jisoo is really struggling, because her abdominal wound, it was not fully healed from when she had her surgery. And then she went through a lot of physical, altercations after that. This is last season. And then going into this season, she once again had to go through a lot of different things. So bottom line is, her wound seems like it's starting to cause her issues, whether it's infected or it's, or she got hurt again. We're not sure. But either way, she's not doing well. And she starts to get a little delirious when talking with the military people, and they, of course, have no idea what's going on with her. They just assume that maybe something's wrong with her. But eventually they figure out that she's not a monster, that she gets it together kind of at the last minute. But we find out that while all this is happening and people are being filed into this place, the man who they picked up on the bus chooses not to go in, because he's got his rifle and he doesn't want to give it up. The military basically are like, if you're coming in here, you got to lose the knife or lose the gun. And he's like, I'm not doing it. So he chooses not to go in. And then we see that with the military, there is some issues going on, because they're being dismissed. Basically, the guy we saw from a couple episodes ago with the scar on his face, he's coming in and wondering why soldiers are leaving. And the soldiers let him know that the high ranking command has told them that they're relieved of duty and that they're allowed to just take a weapon and leave. And of course, he's like, how? Why? Like, that's not what we're supposed to be doing during an emergency. He goes and talks to him, and basically that guy tells him, look, it's not getting any better. We're losing people left, right, and center. Leadership has no answers. Like, I'm trying to get people to do, like, he's like, I'm only going to fend for myself. I'm telling you to fend for yourself. Like, forget getting court-martialed at this point. Just try to survive. And of course, he's not okay with this. And we find out through this as well that apparently, we found out like last episode that apparently people suspect that he hurt his family, and we still don't know if that's the truth or not. But hearing that, it kind of was framed like he was going to do something to his supervisor or his commanding officer, because he was clearly not happy with the command relieving everybody of duty, right? We saw in episode 2 that he takes his duty very seriously. And anyway, his commanding officer ends up taking his own life, which we don't find out until later, but things are just falling apart with the military, I guess is the point. And that's when the guy with the scar realizes we have got to take matters into our own hands, because clearly leadership is losing it. But we have to do something here. Like, we have to create order if there's no order. And in the meantime, we see that back over at the facility where all the monsters are at, that the president is in this bunker along with these monsters, and he has taken the scientist and he is basically threatening his life, saying, you need to give me the vaccine. Like, we've given you all these resources, free reign, because we want you to create a vaccine and give it to us first, because we're the leadership, AKA we don't care about everybody else. And he's like, we've given you time. Where's the vaccine? And then we find out that the doctor apparently sent a suitcase out with somebody. And that's basically been his leverage he's been using against leadership to give him free reign. And so he basically said, I created the vaccine, but it's out there and you're never going to find it unless you let me do what I want. But anyways, it looks like they ended up finding the suitcase and whoever was carrying it. They bring it back and it's locked, of course. I think it was it was locked with a bio lock. And they're like, you need to open it and give us the vaccine. And the doctor, of course, is trying to stall. And in my head, when I was watching, I was thinking, I bet you that box is empty. I bet you anything. Because even when he told Hyun-soo that he created the vaccine and distributed it already, I didn't believe him. Because it's not something you can really vaccinate against, right? It's not a disease. It's not an illness. It's literally like a weird metamorphosis that they can't explain. So anyway, they end up we see that in the meantime, the president is freaking out because he's like, if we still don't know the cause of the monsterization and that people can turn at any time, the biggest threat is still people. Like, just masses of people are always going to be a problem. So he basically thinks that the only way to solve it is to wipe out as many people as possible, because that will reduce the amount of monsters that could potentially be created, which of course is insane. And the president has the codes to actually start releasing, I was going to say nukes, but they're not actually nukes, but he does have the ability to release these explosives. And he says, I'm going to fire them at the stadium. We're going to take out as many people as we can. So anyways, the president ends up setting off these explosives and aiming them at the stadium. And these explosions start going off. And then the soldiers who were there, including the one with the scars, like, what the heck is going on? Like, who authorized this? And they basically let him know, like, the only person who could authorize an airstrike like this is the president. And they know where the president is, of course. So that's when he's like, okay, things have literally gone completely off the rails if they're firing on civilians and military that were there too. So he basically says to the remaining soldiers that are there who haven't completely deserted yet, he's like, we got to go and end this and stop this, because this is what happens when there's no order. So they follow his orders. They head over there and they manage to break in and stop the remaining strikes. And then we find out during that takedown that the president was starting to turn into a monster, which is why he got so desperate to get the vaccine. And he ends up fully switching into his monster mode, which was absolutely disgusting, for the record. And they manage to take him down, and they stop at least more of the explosives from going off. But there's already a lot of damage done to the stadium. And then we see our refugees from the apartment building. They were making their way to the stadium when this was all happening. And of course, chaos ensues when they start seeing all this damage and destruction happen around them. And unfortunately, we do end up losing a couple of people. We end up losing Jisoo, which of course was absolutely heart-wrenching. We see that Eunyu is devastated because that was the last person that kind of was her tie to her brother. Anyway, it was really sad, and we almost lost the little boy as well. That was essentially how we ended the episode with them. And so then we end the episode, well, almost end the episode with Ji Kyung. She is now heavily pregnant, running away from this facility that is now on fire. And she can't get very far because she's now in active labor, because this child is trying to literally claw its way out of her body. When I tell you that is like the stuff of nightmares. Like I've never had a kid, but I feel like if I was pregnant and watching that, I would be terrified. It is so scary to watch. But anyway, she starts to run away. She ends up having to run across a frozen lake. And eventually it's just too much. She can't run anymore. The baby is literally trying to kick its way out. So she decides she's got to have to just stop and try to give birth right there on the ice. And then halfway through her labor, the ice beneath her starts to crack because yeah, that's just always a risk. You know, people do not go on frozen lakes, okay? They're rarely safe. But anyway, the ice beneath her cracks. She falls in. She is basically helpless because she's in this extraordinarily compromised position. She's in pain and the baby is coming out. And so we don't see much of what happens. It looks like she's going to drown. It looks like, and again, if you've ever fallen in cold water, you know that you've only got a couple of minutes before your muscles start to seize from the cold. And that seems to be what's happening to Ji Kyung. But then we see, you know, basically a flash to a new scene, and she has been pulled out of the water, and the baby is out of her, and she sees that her baby is no longer a baby, but looks like at least a toddler, and it looks like a monster. Like it doesn't look human at all. And so that's basically how we end, is her looking at this baby and kind of trying to crawl her way over to this baby who clearly saved her life. But again, we have no idea what's happening with the baby at this point. So that was it for Yi Kyung. And then we see that the soldiers bring the rest of the survivors to underneath the stadium, where we see that there's a woman down there who says that she's got space and room for people underneath the stadium if they want to come and stay there. And so that's basically where we end the episode. So a lot happened in this episode, actually. Quite a bit went down. We've got Hyunsu, who is effectively paralyzed underneath this facility. We have a bunch of neo-humans who've been tested on and abused by humans for God knows how long that are now on the loose and possibly under the leadership of a crazy man. Yi Kyung now has a monster baby who is, like I said, not a baby anymore, and we're not sure what happened there. And we now have our survivors who are now just basically terrified because there's no government, there is only part of the military, and where they were supposed to be as a safe zone was no longer safe. So yeah, lots of craziness going on there, and it was kind of a crazy episode, but I was very like looking forward to seeing like how Hyunsu is going to break out of this and what he's going to do going forward, because as far as his storyline goes, I was just the whole episode thinking, my guy has got to figure out a way to accept that he's no longer human fully and be okay with that. Because I think that's why he's fighting his monster side so bad. And I don't think he'll ever fully turn, but I don't think he knows that yet. And that's one of the reasons why he's having such a hard time when he goes up against people like the Changeling. So yeah, it was an interesting episode. A lot went down, as I mentioned. It was a pretty long episode, but that was the State of the Union, and that's what happened. So that's basically my quick review recap of what happened. And again, apologies for not having the video reaction. It wasn't meant to be this time around, but I do appreciate those of you who did watch this review. Please let me know any thoughts, feelings below if you have them. And if you appreciate this video, show it some love, and I will see you in the next one.